dad was, and it's funny because I just saw him 2 days ago. He was up here for this charity golf tournament we did, and even now, my dad's north of 70 years old. Um, but he tells me now all the time, every time we talk, I love you, I'm proud of you, I love you, I'm proud of you. But for the first, 21, 22 years of my life, those were not words that I heard a lot from my dad. And so as I got older, I started to develop this resentment toward my dad. He was a recreational, casual drinker who, over time, became more than that. He drank a lot, every day, blackout, and so as I got older and I started to achieve, some reasonable modicum of professional success, I started to resent. I started. I resented him, but I think more than just the resentment of my dad, it was this resentment toward his inability to get this monkey off his back. I did not have an enlightened view of addiction. I just saw it as most people did and probably still do to a certain extent. It was a weakness. It was a weakness that he couldn't control. And so this went on for years, and we were essentially estranged for a number of years. Then he got into a fender bender. He got into a car accident about 5 years ago. He was driving drunk. He'd retired from the post office after about 40 years. He had no hobbies or interests, very few friends, in part because he also worked the third shift, not just the drinking. And he got into this fender bender, and I was working at the Today Show at the time, and I had started to do a number of, I had done some stories on addiction and the way that I viewed addiction. It had changed. I knew, I knew what it was, and as Oprah used to say, when we know better, we do better.
Mhm.
And so I saw it as an opportunity, and we rallied the family. We staged a professional intervention, and we got him into an inpatient facility. And keep in mind, at this point, my dad is, at that point he was 66, 67,
Mhm.
and had been. We're not talking like weekend drinking. We're talking hard drinking for 40 years. And we sent him to this place in Statesboro, Georgia. I was not optimistic that it was going to work. And then I go down there. Part of the program is, you have to visit with your children and your spouse while you're in the program. They come and see you in this new environment, and you talk and you air grievances that you've been holding on to for like years. They do like family therapy. So I fly down to Statesboro, Georgia, one day after the show, and as soon as I saw him, and as soon as we hugged, I knew that he was different, and he hadn't had a drink since. And
Aw.
not only has he not had a drink, Cari, he gave up cigarettes
Mhm.
during COVID. The doctor told him that if he had another cigarette, he might die. So he quit cigarettes cold turkey.
That'll do it for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, and not, but he has relationships now
Yeah.
with his children and his grandchildren that he was totally incapable of having just 5 years ago. And so the book is about that. The book is about redemption. It's just, but I also, for me, it was cathartic. I got to interview my dad for hours and ask him all the questions
Mhm.
that I wanted to, and we have these recordings, and it was just, the first line in the book is, my father was born in a prison in West Virginia, and we never talked about it until I sat down to write this book, and that's true. Like we had never, but
That's
I
that first line, I was like, "Whoa." And if we've never talked about it, why was
never.
there in prison? What was going on? That was very, very naked of you. What I'm also hearing though, Craig, is as you wrote this book, it helped you heal and forgive and realize that the compassion is important and empathy is important because when you resent your parent, it's hard to let that go because
Yes,
there are things we think they owe us that they didn't give us that we are trying to figure out as adults because we didn't get it when we were children. Um, I had the same resentment for my family, my parents, both my parents actually. But once I started to forgive them, you start to understand more, you know? And I want to know, now that you have this different perspective and you are now you have a better relationship clearly with your father. How do you see his good traits and his bad traits displayed in you as a dad?
Oh, oh, you're good at this, Cari Champion. You're
I've
good at
done an interview one time just before this.
you're good
Before
at
this
this.
one.
Oh. Let's start with the bad, then we'll go to the good.
Okay, babe.
Um, I think bad traits, you alluded to this earlier. My dad worked third shift. He worked third shift for all but I think 3 years of his career as a mail clerk at the post office. So that's 36 years. And that's a brutal shift. I didn't find out until I sat down to write this book. He worked the third shift because you made a few extra bucks. And so he didn't go to college. He was the youngest in the family. There wasn't any money left for him to go to college. He went to the military and took this job at the post office as a mail clerk. And I'm not telling you anything he wouldn't tell you if you were talking to him. It was miserable. It was a miserable job. He didn't enjoy it. He liked the people, but it was important to him, even as a self-described drunk. It
Mm.
was important for his kids to go to college and for his kids to be successful. It didn't happen for him in the way that he wanted. So he worked that third shift to make some extra money to give us to college. Holidays, weekends, he picked up all the extra shifts for money. And I remember when I started my career early on in Columbia, South Carolina, I worked 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. I did not say no. I worked 6 days a week for a long time. And I did it at the expense of relationships. I did it at the expense of, at first, my physical health, and then to a lesser extent, I think probably my mental health, although we didn't talk about that back then.
Mhm.
And I remember, I remember I would say to some of my close friends at the time, maybe you went to a better college, maybe you came from a better family, maybe you were smarter, better looking. You weren't going to outwork me.
That's right.
You
Mhm.
weren't going to outwork me, and I lived it. And I picked that up from my dad, and I used to wear that as a badge of honor. And as I get older, I realize that probably wasn't the best approach. There probably should have been a happy medium or a happier medium. That was a bad treat. And I'll tell you something else. And I've talked to my therapist about this as well. I went through a phase in my 20s where I was out in Vegas like every few months at a blackjack table, or I had a bookie. I would bet on games, and for a while I was drinking more than I wanted to, and then I realized I have an addictive personality. That's genetic. And so that was something else that I had to wrestle with. That was something that I inherited from my father. Those are the bad traits. Those are the
Yeah.
and good traits. My dad, and it's and people who don't know him, who just meet him for the first time, it takes a few minutes to adjust to him. He has a sense of humor that is dark and twisted. Um, but he's one of the funniest people that you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
I'm not that funny, but I'd like to think that I have the ability to find humor in awkward situations. And I picked that up from my dad. I
Yeah.
picked it up from my dad. And another trait that I've always enjoyed, and now granted, when I was younger, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. My dad is one of these people in the family, maybe the only person sometimes. He doesn't get involved in a lot of drama.
Mm.
Like he's aware of things that are happening. He doesn't get bogged down in a lot of the drama that consumes families.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I thought it was because he was indifferent, apathetic, maybe. No, he just realized that, as he says to me sometimes, like, most people are crazy. Like, you got to find the crazy you can deal with, and manage that crazy. And I'm like, you know what? Those are wise words.
No wiser words.
Wise words. Wise words. And it's funny because when we would talk after rehab, Again, he's in rehab for weeks, months. And I talked to him. I think it was when I went down for my visit. I said, "Pops, how's it going?" He said, "Man, let me tell you, I'm a drunk and I hadn't done right by a lot of my family. But I tell you, you sit in this place long enough, you realize I ain't so bad." And he proceeds
Yes.
to
Yes.
go on and on.
He's like, because so and so's crazy.
Oh,
This
yeah.
such as this.
Oh, yes.
You know that old saying, you put all your problems on the table, everyone puts their problems on the table. You're like, let me just take my little problems back. Because
It's true, but it's true.
I don't want your problems.
But the longer you live, and you know this, but my father's taught me this. We're all broken.
Yeah.
Everyone's broken. Some people are better at pretending that they're not or hiding their, but we're all broken. Everyone's broken.